I am Emma Brown. I have been married to my 30-year-old husband Logan for almost 8 years now. We have no children, and the only person I could call family was my husband. I lost my parents when I was 18. It was an unfortunate car accident. I have no siblings, and I was originally estranged from my relatives. Suddenly, I was all alone. I had social anxiety, so I had no friends, and was all alone. I spent most of my time just crying in the empty house. It was then that I met Logan, who was 5 years older than me. He was hitting on me in the street, and that's how I met him. Logan was bright and just a good old boy. I was in the depths of grief at the time, so rather than realizing the laxity of the situation, I was fooled by his endless cheerfulness and ended up going out with him and even marrying him. I now regret that very much. My husband calls himself a breadwinner, but from my point of view, he's just a deadbeat. He doesn't even try to work diligently. He gets deceived by smooth talk and then gets saddled with debts. He believes he'll turn things around with one shot, but that has never come to pass. He doesn't get drunk and become violent, though. That's about the only thing I can call his strength. I provide for most of the living expenses. However, we cannot live very well on my part-time job as a cashier, so obviously we end up borrowing money from his parents. My parents-in-law were well aware of their son's situation and understood how I felt. They treated me as if I was their daughter, which was really important to me since I've lost my family. My parents-in-law used to give the money directly to my husband at first, but he quickly gambled it away, so now they only give it to me. My in-laws are not wealthy, but they are a little more financially comfortable. But it was very painful for me to continue to live a life being spoiled by my parents-in-law. It's not in my nature, so it's unacceptable for me. I tried to convince my husband many times. A full-time position may be difficult, but I want you to do some work. My husband only laughed as much as I yelled at him. Words don't get through to him. After trying many things, I finally reached the point of giving up. I was always ready for a divorce. However, if we divorce, my parents-in-law will be saddened. I could not make a decision and could only continue to live in frustration. Until one day, I was getting ready to go to my part-time job. I looked over at the couch and saw that my husband was lying on the couch, looking at a dubious pamphlet. He read the text with a grin, making light of it, and eventually fell asleep. This was his routine. I once pretended to make a mistake and threw a basket full of wet laundry at him. I was unintentionally impressed when he didn't move from his good spot, even after being hit by the basket. No matter what I say, he doesn't listen, and no matter how many times I warn him, he doesn't stop. I was prepared to run away at any time rather than spending time with my husband. It was more efficient. I left the house as usual and saw a girl a short distance away. That's someone I know. It's Mia, my husband's sister, my sister-in-law. She is quite a bit older than my husband, and would have been 17 this year. I had not met up with her for a while, but I had seen her often. This is because she was scouted by a talent agency and her career blossomed. She was now in one of the girl groups featured in various media. Mia, what's wrong? When I called out to her, she looked at me with a surprised expression on her face. Did I have the wrong person? Her reaction is somewhat strange, so much that I thought I'd made a mistake. She seemed to try to answer me, but runs off without saying a word. Don't tell me she's forgotten about me. Such a question came to mind, but there was no point in thinking about it any further. I'll ask my in-laws later. So I made up my mind and headed for my part-time job. Then one day sometime later, my husband's behavior changed a little. Normally, he would be looking at dubious pamphlets, But today he brought home some magazines that young girls would buy and read through. Has he developed a taste for young girls? I was worried about that. But when I looked closer, I saw Mia in all of the magazines. My husband had bought the magazines that featured his sister. Then he said, "I'm going to invest in Mia, and I'm going to be a very rich man," he declared. Once he joined a fan club of a girl group, bought a large amount of merch, many copies of the same CD, etc., he was unstoppable. Our small apartment was quickly filled with their merchandise. Where did the money come from? No matter how many times I ask, my husband never answers. Just trust me and see. After saying that, he went out somewhere. When I told my husband's behavior to my parents-in-law, they sighed in resignation. Mia is very important to them, and they are very pleased that her brother Logan is supporting her. But my husband Logan is not really supporting Mia. He is trying to turn her existence into a money machine. My in-laws and I were well aware of that, and all we could do was sigh. In the meantime, I told them that I ran into Mia. Then my parents-in-law looked at me strangely. Mia has moved into a dormitory provided by her agency for her showbiz activities. They said that since she'd moved into a city that is a long way from here, she should not be able to return so quickly. Even if Mia had returned home, I don't think she would have come to see her brother before her parents. Even she would have been well aware of her brother's unfortunate character. They won't bother to meet just because they are related by blood. So, wasn't that Mia after all? Thinking about it won't get me anywhere. Still, I was worried about this. Then a month passed. Mia was laughing at a show on the TV. From what I can see on the screen, she seems to be having fun and doing her best. But for some reason, I couldn't feel reassured. Then suddenly, 3 large cardboard boxes arrived at my apartment. All the contents are merch of her girl group. Only my husband would do this. As soon as my husband, who had been out of town, returned home, I asked him to explain. My husband, however, went straight for the cardboard box and gazed lovingly at the merchandise, paying no attention to me. The cost is quite high when you add them up. When I asked him how he purchased it, my husband said, to my disbelief, "I sold your new house. I sold for $20 million, and I am investing it all in my sister." What a thing to say. Stop messing around. I was so angry that I pressed my husband for answers. My parents had left me a small house and a small amount of savings. I could not go home right away after I got married. Still, for me, it's a precious house filled with family memories. If we get divorced, I'm going back to that house. With this in mind, I had it renovated. Unfortunately, it's so dilapidated that it's almost as if I'm building a new one. I've been fixing it up little by little with the precious money my parents left me. This man sold such an important house for his own reasons. For the most part, I didn't tell my husband about the existence of the house. How did this guy know? I can't stop feeling nauseated by the disgust that comes over me. My husband was grumpy when I accused him of selling it without my permission. "What? I can get you as many documents as you want. It's for my sister. Wouldn't you be willing to help us?" Then he laughed. What does this man think people's feelings are? The next thing I knew, I was running out of the house. I couldn't stop feeling angry and said, not knowing who I would hit at this point, I headed for an unpopular park. There was no one in that park, since it wasn't well known. I've walked quite a bit, so I'm a little less angry. Sitting on an old bench, looking into the distance, I saw a figure around the sandbox. Is it a child? No, it's a bigger boy. I casually looked at the figure and eventually realized that it was someone I had seen before. No doubt, without thinking about it, I ran toward that person. A figure notices me and hurries to leave the scene. I called her name and Mia stopped. The look on her face renders me speechless. She seemed so dead inside. Her face was pale, and her eyes looked vacant. People whose hearts have been broken are usually like that. So did I. So I knew immediately what was happening to Mia. Mia refused to take my hand. "Do you want something from me too?" I don't know what she meant, but I'm sure she's having a hard time. I couldn't find the words I wanted to say. Trusting my own experience, I told Mia, "I don't want anything from you. I just want you to do something." With that said, I turned my back. I wanted her to follow me. That was my only request. Mia stands still in silence.
Then she followed me slowly.
After shopping at a nearby home improvement center, we headed for the riverbank. It's a place that's open for camping when the season arrives. As one would expect, no one is using it now that it's autumn and it's dusk. I heated water on the gas stove I had procured without talking to Mia. Mia stares into the fire on the gas stove and watches the water boil. I made cup noodles. We ate together without exchanging words. Mia was crying quietly. "We used to camp here together a long time ago. That was before I got married." Mia, who was still very young, loved me like an older sister. She must have felt touched by the innocence of those days. Mia continued to cry until the sun went down. Autumn nights are still cold. It was difficult because we had not planned to stay this long. I hurriedly gathered stones and picked up some branches to make a fire. Mia and I were shoulder to shoulder as we watched the mysterious flickering flames. Mia was still having a hard time in the city, apparently. In order to survive as celebrities, they were required to suppress their emotions. They have to keep smiling. That seemed to be more difficult than anything else. And to the adults around her, she is just a commodity. There is always talk of money and never being appreciated as a human being. In such an environment, Mia's heart was broken. She had been patient enough not to worry her parents, but she had reached the end of her patience. However, she could not confide in her parents, and the idea of meeting up with me came to her. So she came to my house that day. But if she sees my face and confides her feelings to me, her heart will be broken all at once. She felt this way and ran away in fear. Her feelings were painfully clear to me. There needs to be a perfect balance in releasing stress from a taut mind, but if done incorrectly, it will collapse at once. It will never be the same again. It makes sense, but there was no mistake about it. So I said nothing and just hugged her little body. That must have made her happy. Her face, illuminated by the bonfire, was now smiling. It's said that people become incapable of telling a lie when they are in front of a bonfire. Next thing I knew, I even told her that my husband had sold my house. When Mia heard about her brother's behavior, she apologized repeatedly. But it's never her fault. I looked up at the starry sky, regretting that I had spoken about it. It was a house that was supposed to become a place for me to live and hold cherished memories. I had lost my mind and didn't care anymore. What am I going to do now? I wonder. My innermost thoughts were leaking out. Then Mia looked at my face. "I'll do my best." That night I dropped her off at my in-laws, and I went back to my apartment. It was midnight, but my husband was still awake. "We've got a sales contract for your house now." What was he confirming with me for? Suit yourself. I had a hard time holding back my own laughter. Mia was the one who put my mind at ease. My husband's outburst continued, and I decided to distance myself away from him as soon as possible. 6 months later, my husband was following the girl group on a national tour. Life alone for a while was very liberating. I came home feeling the pleasant weather of spring. According to a sign in the shopping street on the way, there was a man going crazy in the middle of the street. It was my husband. Last night was the last day of the tour, and they must have returned today. He is holding his phone and making some kind of fuss. I didn't want to get involved, but I had no choice but to speak to him. because people were looking at him. My husband, whom I hadn't seen in a long time, looked really pathetic. He is pointing at the screen of his phone and whining about something. Mia had split from the girl group. It was in the online news. It was the moment when my husband's plan to make her famous and profit from their family connections failed spectacularly. I am crying and forcefully asking him how much money had he put into it so far. When I heard the actual amount of money, I was about to hit him, but I held it back. It's not good to create more drama in the middle of the street. I decided to cut the conversation short at the appropriate point and hurried home. Seeing me like this, my husband looks at me strangely. "Our apartment's not over there, you know. Did you come home late today?" My husband asked me carelessly, to which I replied with a smile. "I live in a townhouse." A recently completed condominium towers over the area to which he points his finger. My husband was speechless, alternating between looking at me and the apartment. "Mia bought it for me. We've already moved in. Mia worked hard on her showbiz activities for me, as my house had been sold without my permission. That's not all. She even provided me with a lawyer to help me with my divorce settlement and to help me with the distribution of my debts. Incidentally, the divorce from Logan has already been filed." "Don't make decisions by yourself." I smile at Logan, who yelled at me. "You can get all the paperwork you want," I told him. Logan broke down on the spot and cried alone. The story does not end there. I had filed a claim to get back my house because it was sold without my permission, and my request was granted, and the house was to be returned intact. The other party, who had already made the purchase, sued Logan, claiming fraud, and he was arrested. Logan was left with a large debt, some of which was charged to me, his wife. My payment was covered by Mia, so there was no real damage to me. Logan filed for bankruptcy after completing his prison sentence. He is now being cared for in some facility, and we are only able to confirm his safety. My in-laws tried to set up funds for their son, but Mia stopped them. No matter how much they care for their son, their daughter's opinion is important too. With this in mind, my in-laws stopped providing him assistance. It's newly built. My home brings with it a sense of nostalgia. I am now taking my time in the house that Mia brought back for me. I still couldn't feel settled right away in that condo. I took the plunge and sold the property and paid the legal fees and other expenses out of it. We got a lot of extra money, and it will all be used for Mia. She is now studying in Canada to be herself. I am no longer a member of the Brown family, but both my in-laws and Mia still take care of me like I'm part of their family. At least let this house be my place to stay. With this in mind, I am living happily in the moment.